Well, hello and welcome to Working Lunch, the Slow Chambers weekly series where we connect with the leaders in our community who are doing exciting things in our area. I'm Jim D'Antona, CEO of the San Luis Chamber, and today we'll be having a conversation with Andrea Lueker, Harbor Manager for Port San Luis Harbor District. Port San Luis, you know, the water area around Avila Beach. Andrea began her career on the Central Coast, spending 27 years working for the City of Morro Bay, 7 of those as city manager. After leaving the City of Morro Bay, Andrea spent time as the executive director of a newly formed nonprofit that worked to provide historic fishing privileges along the Central Coast. Then in 2015, the Port San Luis Harbor District hired her to take over as harbor manager, and she served in that role ever since. Andrea donates a great deal of time to serving on service organizations such as president of the California Association of Harbormasters and Port Captains, vice president of the Morro Bay Community Quota Fund, which deals with sustainable fisheries, the Los Osos Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, Conservancy Land Committee, and of course, we've enjoyed her time with us on the Slow Chamber Legislative Action Committee. I'm looking forward to talking with Andrea today about the governance and functions of the Harbor District and what is coming up for Port of San Luis in the future. Andrea, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jim. I'm really pleased to be here.
Well, so as folks sit down to lunch, let's start out with where are you joining us from today?
I am on the second floor of the Harbor Office building, which is located right at the base of Harford Pier, which is our commercial pier, basically the end of the road, as we like to call it.
It must be a fabulous spot to have your days. So I always like to start by learning a little bit more about how people's career path started. I talked in the intro about your work in leadership of many different levels of government. Was 10-year-old Andrea building budgets and forming committees, or were your initial plans way different?
I like that question. Probably we'll go back maybe just 2 years prior to that. My father was a microbiologist, and he did a lecture series at San Diego State University. And so it was the first time that we got to see the Pacific Ocean. We grew up in Colorado. And so at that point, I knew that I was going to end up in California by the ocean. It took me another, 20 years to relocate, and just started kind of the slow progression through positions. And I'm not sure there's anybody that's decided that they're, at the end of the day, they're going to be a harbor manager, but certainly with the experience I got in municipalities, I think it was kind of a natural progression.
Yeah, well, so obviously wanting to find water, California oceans, how did you first find the Central Coast? And was there something specific that called you here?
Well, after I graduated from Colorado State in Fort Collins, Colorado, I knew I was going to move to California. So I really it probably sounds kind of odd, but I had this map of California, and I just kind of closed my eyes and picked a spot. And it was actually San Luis Obispo. So I subscribed to when I was still in Colorado, I subscribed to it was then the Telegram Tribune for a couple of months to kind of get the flavor. I mean, this is 1986, so it was a while ago, to get the flavor of the community. And that's I kind of checked it out, and then packed up the Volvo station wagon and the Australian Shepherd and drove out. It's kind of on a whim, I guess, a little bit.
And was that because you then you got your master's at Cal Poly? Was that a secondary decision, or was that one of the driving forces that brought you over here?
I wish I could say it was the driving force, because that would be that would just sound really good, but it was not. The driving force, I started out working as a lifeguard on the Central Coast when I moved out here, and the master's degree was a few years after that, when I was working. So definitely, just the big push was to get out to the coast, get to the Pacific, experience that. And I'm not sure I could have picked a better spot than the Central Coast.
No, and that's what's so amazing. And thinking about how people find the Central Coast, again, a small community, not always known, not even amongst the folks of California. So it's amazing when I get to hear these stories of folks who found it from Pennsylvania, Colorado, other places. And it sounds really great. And it, it's amazing to find out where you are today. So it occurs to me that many people might not know exactly what a harbor manager and what a harbor district does. Maybe you can share a bit of what makes up the Port San Luis Harbor District and what operations are under the harbor's jurisdiction.
Sure. I have an elevator speech for that about, your job must be really great because you're probably on the boat all day. So it's not exactly like that, but we do get on boats. So the Harbor District is a special district. We're a governmental entity. Our boundaries basically go from much of San Luis Obispo, the city of San Luis Obispo, down to the county line and then east. So we have, it's estimated about 90,000 people within our Harbor District boundaries. So those are the people, if you're a registered voter, you'll see a little line to vote for Port San Luis Harbor Commissioners. And so all of those people within our district boundaries are part of the district. The property that we have is much smaller. We have Port San Luis and we have the Avila Pier, the Avila Beach, and the Avila parking lot, and then Old Port Beach. So property-wise, we're pretty small, but boundary-wise, we're large. I think the best description, and maybe it was because of my previous municipal experience, but I think the best description of what a harbor manager does is it's really like a city manager, very similar to what a city manager does. I work for 5 elected board of commissioners that represent our district. And then underneath, then working for me, I have 3 department heads, a business manager, a facilities manager, and a chief harbor patrol officer. And then under those people, there are additional staff. We're pretty small. We're about 26 staff total, and about a $6 million budget. But we really operate a lot like a city. We have board of commissioner meetings. We have to abide by a lot of the same regulations that cities do. So that's kind of how it works. And in the management position, it's probably in the port, I get out maybe a little bit more than somebody in a city might. But that's probably the best description that I can give you.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to hear that it very much could be considered like a city, whether it's land use authorities, some police powers that are in there. So what's a typical day like for you? Is it, Point Break or Baywatch or nothing like that at all?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of a combination. You really don't know. It depends. A lot of working with the public, especially, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about COVID later on and how that affected the port, but certainly a lot of public. We deal with a fair amount of regulatory agencies. The California Coastal Commission has jurisdiction when we do something on Harford Pier or on any part of the port that was originally in the water. Then the county has permitting jurisdiction for some of our other projects. We also work with the Army Corps of Engineers. Yeah, typical day. I almost feel like a typical day is atypical, but really a lot of working with the public, trying to figure out what projects we're going to get done. We pass a budget. So some similarities, but and then the tsunami comes. So, you just don't know, or the whales happen to be in the port, or yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's one of the funniest things for me when we were out once, and I thought, like, there was a day that the tide really pulled out far, so people couldn't launch, and it might have been the opening of fishing season. And so you were getting calls like somehow you could influence the tide. But I think it was interesting. What I'd love to know is, what's the weirdest question or questions you've received as harbor manager?
Probably the two that stick out. We are visited by whales on their migration paths. That happens when there's a lot of feed in the water. So the birds come in, the whales come in. It's a quiet spot for them, and we get a fair amount of whales. But we do get a lot of questions about, hey, are the whales going to come in today? Not are the whales there, because we will answer that question anytime anybody wants to know. Absolutely. If you call us and there are whales here, we'll let you know. But we haven't gotten really good on whale whispering yet. And so we're not sure when they're going to come in, besides the fact that they're in migration. So I think that's a positive and kind of funny question, and we do have a lot of fun with that question with the general public. And then probably I'll share the one other one that's not quite so funny, but somewhat horrifying, I think, is that um, we have marine mammals, and they're big, and so we have sea lions that pop up on some of our landings. And I had the question, this is probably 4 years ago, from a parent that wanted to have their, I'm going to say, 8-month-old baby propped up on I'm going to call it the shoulder of the sea lion for a picture. And they wanted to know if that was okay. And so that was a little bit, it's like posing with a wild moose or something like that. Probably not a good idea. So those kinds of questions.
It's surprising, but it's maybe hopefully soon you'll be able to work with the calendaring person for the whales to make sure that we can get those synced up. That's so funny that people think somehow are they coming in today? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the calendar person for the whales is the same one that calendars the mermaids. So as soon as we've got the whales, we'll definitely deal with the mermaids.
Perfect. Well, that'll be helpful. We'll make sure to share that information. Yeah. Is there a major kind of misconception of the work you do? Maybe in my question when I was asking, like you're Baywatch or something, is there do folks, when they talk to you, do they understand your job, or is there a real kind of strange idea of what they think you do?
I think there's a pretty much a strange idea of what we do. And that's why I generally compare it to a city, because a lot of people understand how cities run. And so, especially with a governmental special district. But as I said, a lot of people believe that we spend most of the time. I spend most of the time on the boats. There are people that spend a lot of time on the boats that are here, but not me so much. The other question that I've had before is it a full-time job? And that always kind of tickles me a little bit. I always like to say, definitely, it's a full-time job. And but yeah, there's, and then I think people are sometimes a little bit nervous about asking what happens in a port and what do you do? And they're a little bit of, they're curious, and people are excited about them. So yeah, I think we're going to keep working on education, that kind of thing.
It's tough. But one of those things that we were talking about, you just said about folks who are out on the boats, are one of those pieces is the harbor patrol, right? That you oversee and that you work with. What is their role or jurisdiction? Where do they have kind of their police powers, or where do they use them mostly?
Sure. So it's an interesting. The harbor patrol is kind of a unique breed of law enforcement, because they do enforce laws. They spend a lot of time on the water, and they also spend a lot of time on land. So we do have an armed harbor patrol department. We have 6 officers, and we're fully staffed, so we're always excited about that. So they do both marine and land enforcement. And then we do have a really great relationship with our allied agencies, such as the county sheriff and CAL FIRE and the highway patrol, because there are things that we don't do. We don't transport people to, let's say, the county jail or anything like that. So we work together. It is great to have a harbor patrol law enforcement here, because we are at the end of the road, and we do have a lot of people that come in and out. One of the things that we really focus on, though, with our harbor patrol, which I think makes us a little bit different than, let's just say, a police officer, is the education. I'm guessing that our chief, Matt Ashton, would probably say that 75% of his day might be just educating people about, things in the harbor, and, what you can do and what you can't do and what you shouldn't do. So yeah, it's a kind of a team approach to those kinds of things, but lots of education.
Yeah, and I'm sure even more so when during COVID we were getting, some new people out to the area. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. Well, one of the things I think is most interesting is Port San Luis underwent a master plan update in 2007. That document laid out the plan for the future of Port San Luis. Can you tell us about some of the work and accomplishments that you and the port team have kind of delivered on that plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are actually probably in the next couple of years going to be doing an update to our master plan. So probably the biggest project, and I guess we'll segue into that eventually, is probably the Harbor Terrace project, which is the development of our 32-acre site on the hill that the district has owned for about 40 years. So that coming to fruition, which is, you know, in the next soon period, a couple month probably. That's probably one of the biggest changes that we see in the from the master plan that we currently have. You know, the rehabilitation of the Avila Pier, and you know, in the master plan it talks about keeping your, you know, your the infrastructure updated. So I think the Avila Pier. Continuing working on lease sites on the Harford Pier. So the Harford Pier is the pier that is at the end of the road here at Port San Luis. It's our commercial pier, commercial fishermen, as well as lease sites, restaurants, and that sort of thing. So just keeping those up and going. Those are probably, but probably the Harbor Terrace is the biggest. And then maybe the other one is the federal breakwater that we have. And we can talk a little bit about that as well. So just maintaining that federal breakwater, making sure we find the money to maintain the federal breakwater.
Well, yeah, and I think that's actually, let's kind of maybe dive into a couple of those projects. You talk maybe, I know a lot of folks, probably one of the most visible ones is the Avila Pier. How's that going? Where is that project at?
We're really happy to say that we are going before the California Coastal Commission either in August or September for our coastal development permit, and we need to get a special coastal development permit for that pier because we're going to be likely driving piles to do the repairs. The pier's open about halfway now. It's called Bent 58. It's about halfway down the pier. The pier's long. It's 1,600 plus feet. Once we get the coastal development permit, which we are feeling positive about, then we'll finalize our repair plan. And our facilities staff has written I say close to 2 million. Whenever I say that, he's like, oh no, it's 1.75 million. So $1.75 million to do repairs on that. The district has also put in some money. So if everything goes well, we'll hope to start the repair work maybe this fall on the Avila Pier, which would be fantastic to get people to be able to walk out to the very end of the pier and be out over the water, which is some people's only opportunity to get on the water. So it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a gorgeous, I mean, again, the whole Port Harbor area is amazing. So all the different angles you have from Hartford Pier, from Avila Pier, it gives it some gorgeous views. And speaking of gorgeous views, maybe one of the most gorgeous views in all of the Central Coast is your spot out at Harbor Terrace. And I know that was a project that got underway prior to COVID, but obviously a little delayed. Can you tell us a little bit about Harbor Terrace and kind of where it's at in terms of its development?
Sure. And it's an interesting project. When I came to the district about 6 years ago, we had just entered into some negotiations with Red Tail Acquisitions, which is the developer operator for that project. So it's a 32-acre site. It's going to be about 155 accommodations, which is a combination of RV pads, RV cabins, and then tent camping, walk-in and car tent camping. So lots of different opportunities. And that was one of the camping aspect was one of the issues that led us to be able to get the coastal development permit for the project, because we have affordable waterside accommodations. So at the end of the day, about 155, 160 accommodations. They are close to a soft opening, probably on or about August 16th, and that's only going to be open for walk-in reservations. So I'm going to say that quietly, but the grand opening is slated for sometime in September, and they are doing a phased development. So all those 155, 60 sites won't be available immediately. At the end of the day, there'll be a swimming pool and some really incredible amenities. So it's a pretty amazing project. It's been a long time. It's been a twinkle in the port's eye for 42 years. We're close.
Well, and I do want to give a special shout out to your predecessor, Steve McGraw, and the board of directors at that time, who really kind of focused to try and get that done, because I'm sure that was a heavy lift. Because I know how heavy the lift has been for you to just get it from that point to this point. So amazing thought process that went in there to think about access to this site.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, Jim. We've each done our little part. I'm glad I didn't have to do what Steve had to do. his part. I'm glad he did that, and I'm glad I got to do what I got to do. But it's been and so yeah, it's been an interesting, a great teamwork project.
Absolutely. And so thinking, obviously that will open up new spaces for camping in the Avila area. How will that implement the current setup for spaces allocated for camping? Because aren't some along the road and stuff like that?
We've got a couple of Nobi and Woodyard points. So if you're coming out to the port on the water side, there's two pop outs, and those have camping. It's dry camping. So as soon as the project is done and everything is finished, then the Coastal Commission back in 2011 said to the district, you've got to move those. Those sites can no longer be camping, Nobi and Woodyard. So so those will go away eventually, and there's not a specific plan for those two areas, but I'm guessing it'll be day use, but no overnight camping. There's also overnight camping in the port, and we've got probably about 17 or 18 spaces, and those will stay, and those are with hookups, and those are for specifically if you have a boat and a trailer for some of those spots, and other spots you don't need to. So we'll still have some camping. Nobi and Woodyard will go away, and Harbor Terrace will have the lion's share of the camping.
It's going to be an exciting time for everybody going out there. I know I have friends who are looking forward to when that comes online.
Yes.
Well, I also remember my first time in Avila. I came up to go fishing about 25 years ago with a tour operator out of the port, and was impressed with all the operations kind of housed in the port. It looks like the harbor has some unique offerings currently undeveloped in Port San Luis that many locals might not know about. Is there one or two or that you think folks should know a little bit more about?
Sure. Probably, I think people are probably familiar with sport fishing. We have Patriot Sport Fishing. We also have I know you want me to, I know you're excited about this, Jim. So I'm going to talk about the slime eels. So we have a hagfish fishery, and it's a live fish fishery, and it's at the end of the pier, and it's not a fishery that's open to the public, but the slime eels are some amazing critters, I'll just say. And that's been in the port for probably 4 or 5 years, specifically in that site. And then something we just added seems like a couple of months, but probably 6 months ago, is the opportunity for the commercial fishermen to sell their own catch in a fisherman's market. It's really, if you think farmer's market and put in the word fisherman, it's really the same thing. They can show up with their catch, they can sell it. We've allowed them, we're letting them at this point in a pilot project use one of our empty buildings on the end of the pier in the interim, and they can sell what they've caught. And it's nice because you then can walk out and you can talk to Tom about what are you catching, which vessel is yours, where did you get this, and it's kind of nice. That's been very popular. It's currently Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and it's going pretty well. So that's probably the one of the most unique things that's happened lately.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been out there, and really amazing to be able to see that fresh catch and be able to take it home with you, right? In some of these fabulous local caught fresh fish. So I think that's a great, very interesting. And if folks have never, ever seen anything about a slime eel or a hagfish, just look it up online. It is one of the strangest things I've ever seen, but it's right here in Avila, right here in the port.
Jim, the other thing that we're going to open up probably probably around Labor Day is that we have a new fish market, Harford Pier Fish Market, which is going to be just opposite from the commercial fishermen's market, and it's going to be more of your typical retail fish market. So that's an exciting, and that is a lessee that's going to be opening there. So some exciting things happening, and then Mercy's, of course, which is a staple, and Fat Cats, the ones that everybody knows about.
Yeah, it's a really great experience, and you guys have done such a great job managing all that, and looking forward to all the new things coming. So maybe as we get here towards the end, maybe you could talk about maybe what this past year and a half has been like for the port. I imagine all those people flocking to the beaches and pier to enjoy outdoor recreation might have created some opportunities or challenges. How did that go?
Looking back on the COVID pandemic, I think it's probably one of the most challenging that I've ever experienced in my, I don't know, almost 35 years now of public service. We were very busy. It was the never-ending summer, and that's it. It was, I think, those months of March and April, 2 years ago, or I guess it was just last year, March and April of 20 were challenging because we were struggling with what we needed to close and what we needed to open and what restrictions we needed to put in place. For the most part, we stayed open. All the employees were here because we are all considered essential. The businesses were really flexible about following the precautions, and we did some outdoor dining and some expansion of people's areas so they could still stay afloat. After those first couple months, and of course all the sanitizing, a lot of people on the beach. We brought in some lifeguards a little bit more often than typical. And the district took a pretty significant hit, upwards of about total of about $800,000 between revenues and expenses. But then we also realized a lot of people coming in, and when people started coming back and getting out, because everybody was to go to the beach, and sometimes that was frustrating, but we got through it, and we were just busy, and we joke about the summer never ending, and it's still happening, which is great. I think a lot of people got to experience Port San Luis that maybe never would have. So I'm hoping it's at least another 20, 30 years before we have any sort of other pandemic. But we did it, and it really was a joint effort with everybody here just working together, including our board of commissioners.
Yeah, it definitely felt that you guys did a great job managing a very difficult time, right? With crowds, with people, with, a lot of folks maybe finding it for the first time, not knowing the rules, whatever. So a big shout out to your team and everything you did, as maybe new people found boats and new people learned how to launch and all of those fun things. Well, it's already been almost a half hour, and I do want to make sure people can learn more about Port San Luis. Where should they go to find out more? And I mean, you are a government entity and you have public meetings, right?
We do. We meet the fourth Tuesday of the month. We just started back in person. So we just met on Tuesday. It's here at the Coastal Gateway or in the port. Those meetings start at 6. We love for people to come. We had a pretty good showing. Our commercial fishermen came out on Tuesday night to share some information. Our website is portsanluis.com. Pretty clear. It's a lot of information. And then we always encourage people to pop in the office, to give me a call. We're all on the website, because the more we can tell you about Port San Luis and what we do, the better it is. So we are excited to answer any sort of questions that anybody has. And it's really like everything else. There's no dumb questions.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and drop for our listeners and watchers in the chat below the link so that folks can click over to it. It's a great place if you have questions about what's going on that day or what's going on that week or what's coming up to go over and find out, because there's amazing things happening over at the port. And now we'd like to end our program like we do kind of every week. What are you looking forward to this weekend?
So there's been a proliferation of jellyfish in the water up until about right now. So I am looking forward to getting back in the water with the surfboard and the absence of jellyfish. That is truly what I'm looking forward to this weekend. And some family time, of course.
That goes without saying, but yeah, surfing time, that sounds fun and good. And I didn't know about the jellyfish, so that's interesting.
Oh yeah.
That probably makes things a little tougher. So it sounds like you'll have a blast with that.
Yeah.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time and walking us through more about what kind of going on at Port San Luis. Very helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it's always so wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you, Jim. And I do encourage anybody to, contact us if you've got questions. And I appreciate the opportunity. It's always great.
Yes. Well, as always, if you have questions for our guests, feel free to add them into the Facebook comments below. And the Port San Luis team will hop on and try to answer them when they get a moment. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. We hope you'll join us next week, same place, same time. We'll be sitting down with SLO County District Supervisor John Pichon, where we'll discuss the current search for a new county clerk recorder, how redistricting might affect San Luis Obispo, and what his hopes are for the future of the county. We appreciate you tuning in. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay healthy and safe out there.